and this seems to be like a regular Monday spot for him these days because his Football Morning in America column that you can catch, NBCSports.com and ProFootballTalk.com, is just a must-read. And this one that he filed, I believe, at 1 in the morning today is no exception. Also from Football Night in America and Sunday Night Football. Peter King back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Peter?
Rich, so good to hear you. You're on NBC. It's exciting.
It is exciting.
Congrats.
Look at us together. This is great.
Yeah, that's great. Cheers.
All right, Peter.
You know, when I saw your list of guests,
yes,
and you tweeted it out,
yes,
you had Peter King, Carson Palmer, Tom Selleck.
Yes.
I immediately thought of the old Brian Piccolo, Gale Sayers, I am third. I just said, let's put Selleck 1, Palmer 2, King 3.
Well,
I'll happily ride off in the sunset with that.
You know what? When I do my cast listing, it's always in order of appearance, Peter. I don't know why. That's just a habit. It's a habit. It's a habit I can't break. So let's start with that. With the draft in order of appearance, we'll be seeing the commissioner, I imagine, up first from his basement. How did you nail down exactly where in his house he would be announcing these picks, Peter?
Well, Rich, as you know, two weeks ago, you were at the top of my column because you basically said, because I called you and I said, hey, I hear there's an outside shot. It's a maybe. It's definitely not likely, but an outside shot that Roger Goodell will do this from his home. And you said, hey, in this stay-home era, what a great example that would be, the commissioner doing the draft from his home. And so it went from a long shot to a reality early last week. And I'm told that, he has a very nice basement in his home in Westchester County, New York.
Yes.
You would think that the commissioner of the NFL would have a fairly large home and a well-appointed one. And so, Rich, he is going to stand in his basement. I suppose there will be some sort of podium, but with the way that at-home cameras now work, and I have one, you have one. I mean, most people in TV, I think, or many people in TV have them. When you're on one of those at-home cameras, you look just like you're in the NBC studio or something. I mean, it's beautiful. It looks absolutely perfect. I mean, you watch Tom Hanks over the weekend do SNL,
right?
And he didn't have a $1 jillion camera. I'm sure he had one of these at-home cameras. But anyway, and Roger is going to do that, and they are going to put basically a screen behind him in which, when the Bengals are up, they'll have 15 Bengals fans in these little boxes. These things that we're getting used to watching now, these Zoom videos now. With everybody being able to be called in. And when he makes the pick, people either boo, cheer, whatever, and he'll do that for every pick in the first round a week from Thursday.
And will they be able to be heard when he's introduced, Peter?
I don't know the answer to that, Rich. I assume you're asking me, are they going to be able to boo the living tar out of him? I don't
Peter,
know that.
Peter, it's an audio question. It was just a tech question. It's just a question about the audio and the broadcast.
Who knows? We'll see what happens. But most of the reaction to that note in my column today has been, well, wait a second. How are we going to be able to boo? And I said, I can't help you there. I don't know.
Peter, you've seen it. I've seen it. Everybody who boos him, when the commissioner actually goes into the crowd, as he does every year.
They love him, and everybody wants a photo.
Selfies galore. I mean, it has been insane. And I proffer to say, some people who want a selfie might have been the ones that were booing him, and he comes off the stage like, can you sign this? And he does, actually, every single time. Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show, a simulcast going on right now on NBCSN and more. So you're calling it a virtual draft, or people, I guess, are calling it a virtual draft, but you're talking to people who are doing the draft. They don't think there's anything virtual about it. This is as real as it gets. Peter, how is it going to work? That's something that you also shed a light on, again, with Thomas Dimitroff of the Falcons in your column.
I mean, you mentioned what you just said. Two general managers, including Tom Telesco of the Chargers. Telesco said to me, they're calling this a virtual draft. I don't get it. It's the real deal. There's nothing fake about this draft. We got to live with this. We got to live with our decisions. So yeah, the draft is going to be done differently. Obviously, it's going to be done virtually. But, Rich, there's going to be 3 different ways that a general manager is going to be able to call in his pick. And really, one of the coolest things, and I'm just getting used to, I never heard of Zoom a month ago. But one of the coolest things that I was able to do, I've been trying to get Thomas Dimitroff on my podcast, and I asked him on Friday, hey, let's do Zoom. And so he said, okay. And he said, look, I'll call it up on my phone and I'll give you a little tour. So the first part of the conversation I had with him was he was sitting out by his pool, and we were just talking about the draft and how it was going to go. And then he said, hey, let me take you inside. So there's like 7 minutes of Thomas Dimitroff showing Atlanta Falcons draft headquarters, on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. And if you go onto my column and click on the video at the top of the column, you will be given a tour of exactly how one team is going to draft. And just so that you understand the mechanics of it, what will happen essentially is that there will be 3 different ways you can do your pick. There's a private encrypted channel on Microsoft Teams that is going to be the preferred method of teams to draft. So, somebody could go on that channel and inform the league. Ken Fiore, who will be on Long Island at his home, he will be at ground zero of basically moving the draft along. And they can inform him either that way, or they can pick up the phone and call Ken Fiore and tell him, here's our pick. Or finally, you can go on a secure conference call, unmute your line, which will be active for all 3 days of the draft, just continuously. It'll never hang up. You can go on that call and literally say, this is John Doe of the Atlanta Falcons. We select Tua Tagovailoa with our first pick. So that is basically it. There's, as the NFL has said from the start, there will be multiple redundancies in how exactly you can draft.
That said, what is the biggest concern you've heard from evaluators and drafters?
I don't really think there's a lot of concerns other than I think most people, like Ron Rivera told me something really interesting. He said, look, we're figuring out what sort of our line of demarcation. When it gets to like maybe the 3-minute mark or 2-minute mark, we're getting off the phone and we're going to just be concerned with getting our pick in. He said, because the last thing we want to do is screw up the delivery of the pick and have somebody jump in there. And I don't believe the NFL is going to allow that. I think the NFL is going to be understanding of some of those issues, but I think it probably is going to cut down, not massively, but I think it's going to cut down the number of trades in the draft.
Huh. Just because people don't want to attempt it, or
they're not going to be used to this, and especially once it gets to be rounds 3 through 7 or 4 through 7,
right?
And you only have 5 minutes. When you're on the clock and your phone is lighting up, or there's somebody on Zoom on your staff who's getting a call for another team, and then you got to talk, it might be a little bit too much for some teams to handle. I think, as one team told me over the weekend, Rich, especially when shorter period of time, we're going to have to be working. If we have pick number 210, once it gets to 203 and 204, if we know we're going to want to trade back, we got to move aggressively at that time to try to do so.
Peter King, NBC Sports, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Separating the wheat from the chaff, from what you're hearing in terms of the rumor mill, with 10 days to go for the draft, there's a lot of chaff out there, Peter. But what are you hearing about surprises? What are you hearing as a possibility atop this draft that we might not be expecting right now? Well,
probably the thing that surprised me the most in 8 or 10 conversations Friday and Saturday was how much. And again, this is a little bit down in the weeds for people who want my next 5 sentences to be about quarterbacks. Sure. But I assumed going into my weekend that the vast majority of the teams had Jeffrey Okudah, the Ohio State corner, number 1. And I was told, and this is this was backed up to me too, that there's a lot of teams in the league who have C.J. Henderson, the Florida corner, ranked ahead of Okudah. So you could, that's one of the reasons why everybody thinks that the Lions want to dump out of that pick at 3, that there's not a single player that they're in love with. But let's say the Chargers or Miami or some team that maybe we're not expecting, Jacksonville, which I heard really wants to give Minshew a shot and isn't totally focused on a quarterback high. But is it possible that somebody will be so in love and a little bit, they want to be absolutely sure they can get him, either Herbert or Tagovailoa could move up with Detroit to number 3. That is possible. But I also think, as I told somebody this weekend, I said, hey, listen, Tom Telesco of the Chargers has not made a draft weekend trade for the last 3 years. And so I think he's made only one trade that involves a draft pick. That was 2 years ago. He traded a 7 for Cardell Jones. But I do think, Rich, mostly Detroit is where I think the traffic really is probably going to start.
And then that's where I want to start unpacking what you just said there, Peter, because, I know Okudah may not be atop the cornerback draft board for all teams, and that might be a reason why the Lions would want to get out of 3, but my gosh, there's so many transformative players potentially, from Isaiah Simmons to any of the tackles to any of the pass rushers outside of Chase Young that the Lions could use the 3rd overall pick on. But that said, the Tua market is really what might drive that pick being the domino, the big domino to fall here.
Rich, I think the big question is, what is the Tua market right now?
That's the question.
I mean, I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is. You have a guy who is an FOSR, friend of Stephen Ross, Mike Tannenbaum, say I think it'd be irresponsible to take Tua in the top 10 of the draft, coming off all of his injuries. And I totally get it. I've had so many Miami fans say, what in the world are you talking about? The Dolphins have been pointing to Tua for the last 2 years or the last year and a half. And I said, well, that kind of changed, didn't it, last fall, when he got another high ankle sprain that required surgery, and when he had a very serious hip injury that required major surgery. So you can't tell me that the market for Tua in April of 2020 is the same as the market for Tua was in September of 2019. Life changes. So, and again, Miami might trade up and trade a passel of picks to get up to number 3. I don't know. But I just know that is going to be, as I spelled out in my column today, 14 years ago, the Dolphins had a gigantic decision to make. Risk signing Drew Brees coming off major shoulder surgery, may not be ready for the start of the season, or take the safer guy, Dante Culpepper. Well, that decision turned out to be a horrible one by Nick Saban and the Dolphins, and it, in fact, led to Saban at the end of that year leaving Miami. Imagine how the course of football history would have been changed if he signed Drew Brees. Imagine how the Patriots' history might have changed if Nick Saban signed Drew Brees. But I'm just saying that just the same way that decision was huge for the franchise in 2006, they have another quarterback injury decision to make in 2020 that is the biggest story of this draft.
Yeah, and you're hearing from Team Tua, from Lee Steinberg to also Trent Dilfer, agent and throwing coach, that Tua is as great as he's ever been, that he looks as great as he's ever been, and you're seeing the video that came out. I mean, the arm strength is there. I guess
I just have two things to say about that.
Right.
If you were a guy's throwing coach and you were working with him for a long time, what would you say about him?
I know.
That's number one.
Again, I know.
And number two,
right.
number two, if he was hobbled in any way, shape, or form, you think they'd release the video?
Well, I mean, you could see it.
And
you
again,
could see that he's not hobbled.
I'm not blaming them. They're Lee Steinberg, Chris Cabot. Those are his agents. and they are excellent agents. Okay, but that doesn't address what so many teams wonder about, which is Tua going to be able to play 12 or 15 years? If you draft a quarterback and want him to be your franchise quarterback, you're not taking him so you turn that position over again in 5 years.
Yeah, again, he doesn't look hobbled to me, though, Peter. I mean, he looks spry, man.
I am not saying he's hobbled in any way.
Right.
But all I'm saying is that, I mean, you have to consider the injury history on this guy. You just do. And anybody who doesn't is really not being responsible. I understand the wave the flag for Tua thing. If I worked for them, I would be doing exactly the same thing. But there's one thing to say, I love Tua the football player. There's another thing to say, okay, we're guaranteeing him $30 million and he's going to be our quarterback. And you know what? If I had all the knowledge that the Dolphins had and their doctors stood up and said, I stake my reputation on this, I'd take him and I wouldn't worry about it. But I don't know what team doctors inside the Miami Dolphins or Chargers or whoever are saying about Tua.
Yeah, and then we'll see how the draft goes. Last one for you. We'll see how the draft goes with the veteran quarterbacks who are still there. I don't think I've ever started a sentence with anybody this way, certainly with you, Peter, but I heard what Cam Newton told Chris Paul, and I heard what Jameis Winston told Fox News. It sounds like a Mad Lib, but they both seem resigned to not getting a job before May right now, Peter. Would you agree with that assessment? I
mean, first of all, I don't understand this. Jameis Winston is one thing. He's totally healthy. I mean, I think he would much more easily be signed somewhere by somebody now. But this is not because teams don't necessarily. I mean, I don't know what they think about Cam Newton, but this is the most unique set of circumstances about trying to vet players that I've seen in 36 years covering the NFL. You can't fully vet Cam to your liking right now because your team doctor cannot get his hands on Cam Newton, and you can't sit in a room and talk to him. Now, you obviously can have a Zoom chat if you want. I think it's pretty natural why this is going to take a while, at least with Cam. Now, look, I've said this. I think there are multiple teams that if I were them, I'd want Jameis Winston on my team. But, it takes two to tango.
Peter, thanks for the time. As always, I have a feeling we'll be doing this again same time next week when it is actually draft week.
Hope we do, Rich. Thank you.
Look forward to it. At Peter_King on Twitter. And, of course, check out his Football Morning in America column on NBC Sports, ProFootballTalk.com.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.